We have green for go.
Okay, wonderful. And just for those folks who've literally just signed on, the intention this evening is I'm going to be asking Quentin a few questions. I have not got a full screen, so I can't see you waving hands and I can't read the chat. So I don't want to appear rude if I ignore you, but we'll come back, or Piers will interject as we go along. So, welcome, Quentin, to your own stage setting. The Michael Parkinson of Aikido interviews, and now voluntarily reversing role. I think it's marvellous.
I never interviewed Michael Parkinson. I don't really recall it.
Okay. I wanted to let you know early on there have been many suggestions for questions flooding in from those who you've cross-examined earlier. But luckily, while revenge is best served cold, there is no place for cold in Aikido.
Sounds
so
good.
You can relax a little bit. So I'm coming to my first question then, and it is this really. When you first started to practice Aikido, how long was it before it hit you that this was an art that you could indeed carry into everyday life? And how did that first experience manifest itself outside the dojo?
Okay. Well, this may sicken you a bit, but pretty much on the first practice. I think as a young man, I thought about what life was supposed to be about and had sort of set my course, if you like. And when my big bro, Piers, told me to come along to Aikido because he was helping to open up a new club, and I started hearing what they were talking about, I thought, this sounds very familiar. So the ideas were very much in tune with where my own thinking had taken me anyway. So, yeah, kind of from day one.
Okay, but does that mean, therefore, that you, as it were, experienced something of Aikido 24/7 before you practiced Aikido?
No, I hadn't. I mean, I had played judo a little bit, but really purely as a sport and to keep me healthy. But I'd never done it for those reasons. It was just purely my own philosophy for life, really. And it just, as I said, it was just struck a chord.
Marvelous. And so after you'd started your practice, when were you conscious of sort of this concept of Aikido 24/7, taking it outside of the dojo? When did that manifest itself? What was your first experience?
Well, I suppose it's fair to say that whilst I was in tune with it, I was always the one who's being taught rather than the teacher. So I guess it's when I started to teach that I felt I could maybe bring a bit more influence to bear on how it was taught and what emphasis I wanted to place on it. I'd like to say it kind of always played a part in the way I was living my own life. Also made mistakes along the way. I'm not suggesting I didn't, but it was kind of a guideline for me. But once I started teaching, particularly when I opened my own dojo, and then latterly when Piers and I founded Aikido for Daily Life, it became very important to me.
Okay.
And my involvement in Aiki Extensions deepened that even further because I found a whole bunch of people that were thinking similar thoughts and expressing their Aikido off the mat as well. So yeah, it's deepened, but I think it's always been there.
But I'm still going to push you on a specific point is that the teaching period is a little bit later in your Aikido career.
Sure.
But very early on, after you'd started training, was there a moment where you were out on the street or in some situation and you experienced the use of your training in your daily life?
I don't think there was a specific dramatic story that I could tell you, but okay. I think it always influenced the way that I did my professional career. So I'm a financial advisor. That's how I make my living and can afford to spend so much time setting up this kind of thing and the like.
Marvelous. Okay.
But in that, I thought it was very important to treat customers I wanted to be treated myself. So to give them the respect and to treat them all as individuals. Yeah, and I think it's always, and to take on challenges. So when you had an awkward client or a problem with a client, not to run away from it, but to deal with it square on. All of those things were part and parcel of the way I chose to deal with my business, but also life generally.
Beautiful. So I've got a question here, which has actually flown in all the way from Japan, from our mutual friend, the Renaissance samurai William Reed. And Will was my very first Aikido teacher, and indeed of Shodo, brush calligraphy. And his dojo was part of Tohei Sensei's Shinshin Totsu Aikido, mind and body coordination. And the emphasis, there was a great deal of emphasis in classes on the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. So Will's rather interesting question, I think, is how has Aikido practice changed your subconscious response to things? I mean, mainly outside the dojo, since that's what we're talking about.
I would say that the first thing I would say is that a lot of what I know now was subconscious knowledge and now is conscious knowledge, and I use it to deepen my teaching and I suppose my training as well. I suppose the subconscious is perhaps more closely linked with your instincts and your natural emotional responses to stuff. That still happens. There are still moments where I'm not terribly proud of the way I responded to a situation. But it's the measuring stick by which I go back and I say, that wasn't quite what I was looking for here. I don't think I did that as well as I should. And I'd like to think that every time that happens, the tolerance level and the push button bit get extended a bit.
That's right. And so I think, in other words, what you're saying is it's a very deep reservoir, and you can train bits more of it to move into your conscious mind and world.
I think just as on the mat, your training never stops, and there wouldn't be a person on this call who thought even one of their techniques was perfect. You know, you can go back to the very first technique you ever did, and you can still learn stuff about it. Well, I think that's just the same off the mat. You've got a plethora of life situations that you have never dealt with. And when they crop up, well, let's see how what you've learned on the mat helps you handle those.
Lovely. Now, I'm continuing my little chat with Will in Japan. And so we're in the COVID era, and it's something dramatically new and different and challenging for nearly everybody.
Yeah.
Many, looking at slightly the positive side, many, admittedly not all, but many have found something of great value in plain sight during this period. And equally, what we've previously measured as very valuable has maybe disappeared. And so, to use a metaphor, if we can still have a sense of wealth after the money has gone, what is left in Aikido when the dojo has gone?
Good question, Hugh.
I actually, because I believe that Aikido is just another word for life, my answer is virtually everything, actually. We only practice on the mat because it's a powerful enforcer of those principles that we wish to apply to the rest of our life. So, you know, for beginners to go through that experience, I fully endorse it. I encourage everybody to try it. But, you know, I'm busy in the process, and so a number of people on this call of going out to communities who have no interest whatsoever in coming on the mat, but showing them how Aikido principles make a huge difference. So apart from the physical side, which I really enjoy and I'm really missing, the real practice is off the mat anyway for me. It is the 24/7 practice. It's not as many hours as I can get on the mat. That's just a bit of a medicine, a bit of a laboratory where I can test some of the ideas and show them to other people and let them test them as well. So I think there's a lot left.
Yeah. Good. Now, Quentin, you put a huge effort into producing a lovely book called A Way to Reconcile the World, which I show here for those who haven't seen it. And I think I'm right in saying all the proceeds go to Ike Extension. So in case anyone hasn't got a copy, rush out and get one. And my question is, which is the most relevant story, or maybe a couple of the stories for you in terms of this concept of Aikido in everyday life 24/7? You know, without if I can just sort of guide you a little bit, not necessarily being biased towards one author or another, people that you know well, but if I can really put you on the spot and say, are there one or two stories from this book that you feel really dovetails into your concept of Aikido 24/7?
The one that perhaps moved me the most, that I think is most pertinent, is Paul Linden's story about how he treated Parkinson's as his uke. So, you know, he doesn't just have Parkinson's when he steps on the mat. So that's definitely a 24/7 story where he's having to deal with that situation all the time and to blend with it and to be positive about it. And knowing him for as long as I have now, I guess it's, what, 10 to 12 years, Piers, something like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And seeing how he's still going strong on the mat and still doing what he does is pretty inspirational. So I think he's doing a pretty good job of treating Parkinson's as his uke and setting a wonderful example for us all.
Lovely answer.
There are other stories like that, but that perhaps partly because Paul, I think, writes particularly well, and I know him, and his, you know, it's a lifelong story for him now. I think it's very deep.
So I'm going to let me draw you out on a second one then.
There's a lady called Kath, and I can't remember her surname. It's quite an early story in the book. And she suffers, I think, from multiple sclerosis. And that was another story of, you know, fall down 7 times, literally, and get up 8 and deal with the situation. I found that a very moving and powerful story too. So whilst in some ways they share something, hers was the illustration more, you know, she literally falls down lots of times, I would think. And she didn't let it stop her do her Aikido training. And indeed, her Aikido training, again, helped her deal with that. So I thought that was a beautiful story.
Sounds like that's Kath.
I'll say one more for Nico, who's not here tonight. He tells a lovely story of being in Brighton, and some drunk basically says, "I'm going to kill you," comes out of a dark alley, "I'm going to beat you up." And he stays very, very cool and is very friendly to the guy and talks him down completely. And it turns out this other bloke, the drunken guy, thought he was somebody else who had a go at him the week before. But I thought it was a brilliant example of how, although really challenged and threatened, Nico used all the principles to talk this guy down. And literally, I think the guy offers to walk him home in the end.
Brilliant. I think with the lady's name of being Kath Riddock, if I've pronounced that's right, just for the reference. Well, folks, it's a beautiful book, and I just on this, continuing that subject, as part of your 24/7 pursuit of Aikido, you're planning a second volume, aren't you?
I am. I've got about half the stories I need. So if there's anybody on this call who has a story that they think illustrates how they've used it off the mat, then I'd love to have it. And that was always the reason to write it. It was not to be a technical manual of how to do Aikido. It was always meant to be an example of this can happen if you do Aikido. You can get these huge benefits. And the stories, as I think you probably confirm, cover such a broad range of subject, from somebody, you know, using it in their expertise as a pianist to, you know, dealing with thugs trying to attack them in a car park. So it covers a multitude of sins.
Wonderful. Well, look, I think that's been a pretty comfortable start to your interview.
Oh, good.
So I want to draw you out a little bit more because, after all, you're speaking to a fan base, a dedicated audience. You're speaking to the converted in terms of Aikido in everyday life, and indeed Aikido beyond the purely physical in the dojo itself. But it's true, is it not, that a large part of the Aikido community, and I won't say how large or not, people have different opinions, practice for the martial aspect of the art on the mat, and even for a sort of physical workout. Now that's stopped, and perhaps too few have chosen to follow the virtual path that we're engaged in tonight. What's your solution to this, both in terms of bringing more of the Aikido community, existing community, into the current virtual world, and secondly, longer term, persuading them that Aikido in daily life is a thing?
I'm not so sure it's my job to persuade them. I would love to convert the rest of the world to think like I do, but I'm not sure it would make for a great world if that were the case. I think it's a question of I have to stay true to myself and what I think my path is, and offer what I offer. And if people like it, then they take from it what they can and will. You know, I've been working on the Aiki Extensions board for some considerable period of time, and I think we've done amazing things given the resources we've got. But it's quite apparent that we're probably not going to save the world tomorrow. So I think my job as an individual, as a teacher, as perhaps a thinker within the Aikido world is just to present a case and light candles. To use an analogy that Piers used a few weeks ago, the job is to light candles, and you know, hopefully the people whose candles you light other people's candles, and the sort of puddle turns into a small pond, which turns into a lake, which turns into an ocean in the end. I really do believe that the ideas within Aikido can make a profound difference to the way the planet is run. So that's kind of the end game. I just don't think I'll be around to see it. And I certainly don't want to try and, I don't think I have much chance of getting those people who are doing Aikido for other reasons to change their mind. I'll offer my case, and if they come across it and they think, oh, well, maybe there is a bit more to it, then great. But I'm not going to beat myself up just because they don't choose to follow that path. They're doing what's right for them, I guess.
Okay. It's probably worth pointing out in a conversation I had with Japanese earlier today that there was a comparative point that those practicing in Japan, whether Japanese or foreigner, surrounded by a sort of spirituality of being in the place, and that was something that was quite difficult to carry outside of Japan. But it does seem clear, maybe more in the UK than the US or wherever the audience is from, that the sort of spiritual element of Aikido is less prioritized, put it that way.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say there's a different mindset in the West than there is in the East. And we haven't got a very good track record of taking Eastern ideas and sticking with what their origin was and their purpose was. We tend to turn them into sports, which has kind of happened in a way with Aikido. Some of the core elements of our sensei's teaching have been lost. That said, I think our job is not to keep it as a Japanese art, but to find the essence of the teaching and teach it within the cultures to which we belong. I think that is Aikido in everyday life too, that we find where we are in the society we are, and we approach the people that have the same way of thinking as us, and we find new ways of passing that message on.
Okay, so I like the answer. I still think there's an element of being within you know, within range of the converted, so to speak. So I'm going to ask you another question now, to which the answer is not. I'm not going to allow you just to say, I need to light a candle. So I want to transport you to a peaceful countryside setting in Japan now, Quentin. No specific time. You happen to have a long white beard. You are seated under a beautiful ginkgo tree turning yellow in the autumn chill. You're a master of many martial arts and you've learned spiritual elements. Realizing that the combination of these things can transform the world. And your team, you've got a clever team around you. Someone has suggested a trendy name, Aikido 24/7. No one has heard of this yet, and no one practiced this thing called Aikido 24/7. No one in the world has heard of it. Nobody does it. So allowing for the fact that you have all the modern communication tools at your disposal, how would you go about spreading this great idea around the world?
Well, in a way, this community here, these Thursday evenings, is one of the tools I've used to sort of get my message here. And to some degree, I think that's worked, because I've got people from countries that I would never have expected to be attracted to this, who keep showing up week in, week out. So certainly I think putting stuff out there, and even when we get back to the mat, I won't leave. I might not do this every single week, but I still intend to hold sessions every now and then, because I think to some degree we're out of balance. When we go on the mat, the emphasis is on the physical, inevitably. And that's important, but sometimes, and that's one of the reasons why I think Aikido has gone wrong, it gets lost purely in the physical, those deeper elements, the mind-body integration, the philosophy of it all has got lost. Because people are too worried about where they put their feet and their hands rather than the bigger picture. So I think these sessions actually can be very valuable. Writing blog articles, well, I do that. And using YouTube to put these sessions out there and to occasionally record stuff that I think is important. I'm putting together a course online for Aikido University, which will be about Aikido and its relationship to leadership. So I'm doing actually quite a lot of sort of techie stuff to get my message out there. And I think it takes time. I was talking to Sean by email earlier this week, and I was saying that when you do, well, no, it's Gordon, I think. Someone this week, I'm pointing out that, you know, I did a blog, and I did it because I wanted to get my ideas out there. But I also did it because when I wrote, I found I learned stuff. It sort of kind of consolidated my knowledge, and it brought stuff that was in my subconscious to my conscious mind, which helped me. And I wanted people to read it, but I didn't necessarily expect them to. And the more I've written, the more and more people tend to go to the blog articles. So that's gratifying. And actually doing these sessions on YouTube, you know, I'm finding that, you know, you get many more people watch it than I would have imagined would. And many more people are subscribing to the channel to watch them, which again, I mean, it's amazing. It's what I would love to happen, but it wasn't necessarily anticipated.
No, you are doing an incredible amount, and we all commend you for it. Have you, with your blogs and your videos and such like, have you had responses from people, individuals who have not at that time so far engaged in Aikido?
No, I don't think I've had strangers who don't practice Aikido come to me and say, wow, I read this and you know, I'd love to start doing Aikido. I have had that part of Aikido that thinks it's purely martial attack it and say what a load of rubbish it was.
Yes.
But hey ho. I took that actually at the end of the day as a mark that I was making progress, that somebody actually felt the need to have a go at it.
Yeah. Okay, so my next question, moving on, is somewhat linked to what I'd call future messengers, if you like. And by this, I don't want to upset anybody by saying it doesn't exist, but the fact is, certainly, again, in the UK, and it varies a great deal from country to country, many Aikido dojos are male dominated.
Yeah.
It's not automatically an issue per se, but it can have implications for the style of practice and the general environment in a dojo, I think. Could you tell us what greater role, and I am suggesting an enlarged role, you would advocate firstly for women and secondly for children, specifically for growing the art of Aikido generally and taking it into daily life?
Yeah. Let's talk about inclusivity generally, but we'll focus on women as you asked. Yeah, I think it's one example of how Aikido hasn't really lived up to the philosophy. Because if you go to Japan, how many senior female teachers are there that have made it through? Very rare, very rare. So Japan's not a good example of equality on that basis. And I guess it's less true if you go to California. There's so many great women teachers there, in America generally, but it's still true there. And I think it's generally true in the martial arts world and most dojos. It tends to be more blokes. And I think that's because when you visit the websites, what do you see? You see pictures of swords and people being thrown through the air and all sorts of dramatic stuff like that. And I have to say, there are a lot of people who don't find that appealing at all. It doesn't sell the big message of how Aikido can save the world, if indeed it can. So I think a lot of people just are putting the wrong message out there if they want to attract a more balanced community, which I think is invaluable. I've worked really, really hard on our website to make it seem a friendly place for any age, any size, any whatever, with either sex, whatever it is that you're hoping for, you're welcome at my dojo. And I emphasize that. And I emphasize the fact that for me, it's not just about throwing people about. In fact, martial arts is being able to defend yourself is a byproduct. It's not really what we're there for. So I think...
can I come in, Gwen and Hugh? I think there's David has asked a question that links to this very well. And he says, do you think we should advertise it as a contemplative spiritual art?
I've got a problem with the word spiritual because I don't think it's very hard to define. I've had a conversation with Sean here, and I was on a session with Paul Linden the other day, and he asked, what do you want to talk about? And I said, well, let's talk about spirituality, knowing that would be a hot button for him. And we did come up with how we wanted to handle it, which was, it's what you experience in the body, basically. And we didn't come up with something nebulous that you can't really define and can't really understand. So I wouldn't want to describe it as using the word spiritual, because I think it's problematic. I'm not saying it's not spiritual, it's whatever you want it to be, but I wouldn't market it using that word. Contemplative, yes. I would just say, my own personal choice is it's a self-development art. It will help you fulfill your potential. It'll make you healthier. It'll make you more confident. It'll improve your relationships. Oh, and by the way, it's a self-defense. That's kind of the way I go about it.
Back to you, Hugh.
Yeah, so the second part of this, thank you, Piers. The second part of that question was focusing on children, who are, after all, for everything in life, the future pipeline. And I've personally been very impressed by some of the children teaching I've seen, particularly on continental Europe, and during this period where adults can't practice physically so much. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's important that it's done, because you never know what seeds you're sowing and where they will go. It's a hard area to work out, because I think this is quite an adult art in terms of its thinking. And I don't think you can really develop that very well with kids. They don't understand it. They just want to play. I think many martial arts run kids classes, and it's there to make money rather than actually to do anything really good.
Okay.
So I've got it's difficult. I think we need to encourage youngsters in, but I'm not sure what age is meaningful. It doesn't seem to me that they stick around, that many start at the age of 6 and are still doing it at 26. So there's something wrong there. There's something wrong. I mean, I too have met some really great teachers of children, and perhaps they should be answering that question rather than me. I've done it, and I think I did it reasonably successfully, but I always found it slightly frustrating. You know.
Okay, let me make it much easier for you then, and move to the other end of the spectrum. So our world generally respects grey hairs, particularly in Asia, and traditionally teachers rise to the heights of the art through long practice and rank, not necessarily combined with teaching ability, but I won't go there. So what I want to ask you instead is there an untapped market in the older generation, and indeed elderly generation? Has Aikido got something to offer this group in our society, perhaps outside of normal dojo practice?
I think it's got something to offer everybody, Hugh. I mean, I wouldn't target a particular age group. My own view is that you respect everybody. You should respect everybody all the time. But you know, in a class, whoever comes to your mat, however experienced they are in life or on the mat, you give them the respect. And just because you're 80 years old doesn't mean that ultimately you prove that you deserve it. But equally, you could be 5 years old and be very deserving of it. So my position is that you give respect right from day one until somebody proves that maybe they're not necessarily worthy of it. I mean, and traditionally, Aikido has been one of those arts that when people have got all bust up doing other martial arts, they come to us because they believe it's a way they can carry on and still survive. So clearly there is a market for older people doing Aikido because they think it's a softer art. And in some clubs it is, and some clubs it's not. And again, for me, that's a respect issue. So I have a bloke who comes along, still turns up occasionally. He's about 80, I think he's 87 now, Derek. And, you know, he doesn't want to be thrown on the ground anymore because he struggles to get up. Well, I'm not going to make him feel bad about that. You just have to accept what his body can do these days. That he's an extreme example, but I think that's what you do for every student. I mean, Vitaly's sitting in a wheelchair, so he's not going to perform in the same way as some athletic 20-year-old. Steve's blind. He operates in a completely different way. And you have to find ways of connecting with everybody and taking them from where they are to where they could go. And that's kind of one of the fascinations of the art for me as a teacher, to try and understand where the person you're trying to teach is and how you can move them on, and to do that as rapidly as you can. Maybe it took you 6 months to really get the feel of somebody in the past, but I'd like to think I'm probably a bit quicker and a bit more intuitive about it now. Not all the time, of course not, but just trying to be there where that person is and help them take the next step. That's the job, I think. And I'm not particularly interested in targeting a particular age group. Okay.
I think you just used the phrase connecting with everyone, and time has zoomed by. And I think it would be a very good time to sort of open up the channels, either with you directly or through peers who've got the chats in front of them and the audience ready to ask you questions directly. So if I may, I'll say thank you very much and open the floor.
Sure.
Okay, David had another question relating to children, and I think it's pretty good. He says that if you believe that practice is more, that Aikido is more a physical practice, more than a physical practice, then does it make it less interesting for children? I think potentially what he's saying is, actually, are we being condescending to children? And also it depends what age we consider a child to be a child, because I remember very clearly thinking when I was 13 that I knew everything. Obviously I knew sod all, but I used to think I knew everything. So, you know, I think it's a very good question.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry, what was that, Quentin? Piers hasn't changed a bit then?
You cut that out.
Throughout the time that I've run a dojo, I've always allowed children to come along. I don't run a specific children's class, but children can come along. And I've had plenty of children who were super impressive. And I didn't dumb it down just because we had children there. I did make it a bit more playful for them individually. I'd be a bit more playful with them, but I didn't dumb down the message or what its purpose were. And I did try to teach the values no matter what their age was. So I don't think we should lose that, but they operate in a different way, and you have to teach in a completely different way. And I think trying to not lose that balance between keeping them mentally engaged and physically engaged and having fun is a really tough one. And I think you need superhuman patience to do it. And to really get the benefit for the Aikido community, yeah, you've got to be very patient. I'm going to ask Gordon, actually, because you ran a successful children's club for a long time. You've chosen to sort of sideline that for the moment, but just tell us your experience, Gordon.
Nice deflection, Quentin.
I was teaching children's classes for about 15 years at 3 different dojos. So the dojo that I started at, and then the second club I went to, there were 100 children in the kids program. So we would break them up in the 6 to 8, 9 to 12, and teenage category. You have to present the material in a different way, depending on the age group, because they're developmentally at different stages in their life, and they will internalize the information differently. You know, one thing we found is you've got to get them moving physically. So we would play down the philosophy and play up the physical, the energetic aspects of it, because you lose them if you start talking about moving from your center and hara and all the rest of it. You know, you've lost them right from the get-go.
You have to almost teach them in secret, I think.
Well, I think that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
You know, when I started...
I was just going to add, Gordon, that, you know, I've been coming to your dojo for a long time, and I've seen some of your kids who stayed with you for a long time and how they matured. And it was a great example of how Aikido really made a difference for these kids. I mean, it's conceivable they would have been lovely human beings anyway, but I would say they were very shaped by the teaching they had from Gordon over a long time.
Well, I live with one who's done it since 5 years old.
Yeah, and
Quentin knows him very well.
Yeah,
because he did his showdown grading last year in front of Quentin.
And he's a lovely being.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I've lost forgotten what the question was now.
I was just asking you to share your experience of teaching the children. So,
well, the short of it is you need to present it differently to the age group, and as they get older, particularly in the teen class, you can see they start to become more interested in the subtleties of it. And so then you've got to identify, you know, is this student somebody who is interested in the subtleties and the philosophy, or is this somebody that just wants to roll around? So that becomes more challenging. We would have sometimes 35 children on the mat at the same time, and the mat space is 800 square feet. So then there's a organizational aspect to this, which is not really specific to Aikido. Right? So different challenges, but there again, you see that organizational aspect essentially is our uke.
Yeah.
Great answer.
Jamie seems to have her hand up, so I'm not sure if it's because you want
I
to
can speak. I can speak.
No, amazing.
Listen to me. Yeah, I
Go
think I'll
for
stay
it,
off
Jamie.
camera
Go
the
for
time
it.
being. Yeah. Here, I'll make a quick hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I am actually here. Keeping myself all warm. I just, yeah, I know, isn't this great? I can talk. What do I want to say? I must say, I disagree a little bit about the kids thing. I ran a kids program for a long time and worked with many, many kids in the Middle East, and our women's martial arts program. We have a whole young women's young program, and you know, and most of them are karate oriented. But I really think that the whole point of Aikido that I know you appreciate so much, Quentin, around this more peaceful, harmonious way of being is important, and that we can convey that to kids, and the kids get it. There's a different atmosphere very often in karate kinds of classes. And for kids, you know, it's a little bit more, you know, army like 1, 2, hey, 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 yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, no, no. And we don't have that. And I think that that's a very, very different atmosphere. It's a very different sensibility. I think that we can talk about centering. We can, you know, there have been different programs just with kids with emotional difficulties or ADD or, you know, this kind of stuff, behavioral issues, and just learning to sit seiza, to feel their center, to feel their, you know, their ground. I mean, you know, you find ways to talk about this, and to find that they can self-regulate by using centering and breathing practices, grounding practices. And what is self-regulation? They can, you know, modulate their emotions and all of that, to learn, like, it's not about bullying. And what is bullying, and that there's different ways to do it, de-escalation. And, you know, you're not necessarily using a word like de-escalation, but you can talk about these things. Kids get it. Kids, and certainly as with each year, they get a greater maturity and cognitive function and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, it's just a different atmosphere. And I think that the whole point is that certainly I know I've been using Aikido and with Budo for Peace, and which is mostly youth-oriented programs in the Middle East, and I come in with Aikido. It's all about raising kind of a new generation of leaders with a new sensibility and new understandings. Yeah. And I certainly have had parents. I was talking to a guy, his kid was in my class, and he's now 30, and he just had his own kid, his first kid. And I happened to bump into his dad. And he said, you have no idea how much Aikido kids classes meant to him, and what a difference they made in how he grew up and who he's been and what his attitudes are and his whole way of being. And, you know, it's really nice to hear that. And I think it's important that we know that. So I think that, yeah, you know, there's a lot to learn about how to be a good Aikido kids teacher, and playing games and making it fun, and, you know, birthday parties and all kinds of stuff. But, and that's all the fun part of it. But the truth is, we are conveying a very different atmosphere and a very different approach to self-management, self-regulation, relationship, and making a difference in the world, and becoming new kinds of peaceful leaders. So, yeah, I would just kind of take issue with you on that in terms of what's possible with kids through Aikido.
Yeah, no, I think it's we need to probably do it more and more effectively, and whether they stick with it or not, actually, you still don't know what you left them with. That, as you know, someone might come to you 10 years later and say, I still remember that, and it made a difference. Mm-hmm. So, you know, whatever we do has got to be good.
Yeah. It's a really good area to talk about, and I think there are different gatherings and conferences of Aikido kids teachers and all, and I think that this dimension of that conversation is a very important one that would be good to be having more, actually, amongst Aikido kids teachers.
Well, put an advert in for the Aiki Extensions Network and say maybe we should have a topic on that.
Yeah, I think it would be a really good one.
It's a special skill, and sharing the knowledge on it and finding who's doing it really well and being successful and what they're doing to make it successful. And also measuring what success means would be interesting.
And I also think, you know, with each generation, there is some evolution. And there's a lot of cool parents these days, and kids are cool. There's amazing consciousness and capabilities in kids. I mean, I've had a 3-year-old sit on my lap, and I'm playing with my iPad and doing a drawing thing. And then you have to clear it so you can start all over again. And I cleared it, and I kept feeling like, oh, I got to do that. After 2 or 3 times, this 3-year-old is like clearing it, you know, herself. It's like, oh my God, the intelligence, the capability, the learning, the awareness in these kids, and with parents who have a lot more consciousness than like my parents did, you know, from being 50s America or whatever, 60s America. So it's different. And I think we really need to respect that and know that there's so much more potential in the kids, and that we can communicate these, you know, sort of more advanced spiritual ideas or whatever you want to call them in Aikido. We can communicate that to our Aiki kids.
No, I agree. And I have to say that I think my parenting style was totally based on Aikido. I reckon my kids are pretty decent human beings. And I think that's in no small measure to the fact that Alison and I parented in the way that we did. And Alison maybe not so much influenced by Aikido. She's just a lovely person anyway.
She already had it, Quentin.
She already had it, but there you go. That's why we need more women in Aikido, right? Yeah, I mean, I do think that, you know, we all play a role, whether on the mat or off it. It's another example of taking it off the mat.
So, Piers, are there any more questions there on chat for us?
I was going to say, why don't you unmute everybody, Quentin, and then it could be a free-for-all because you've exhausted.
Exactly. And if people haven't got a question in mind, can I suggest that they kind of match Quentin's experiences with their own in Aikido 24/7 if they've got some good stories to tell?
So I'm going to offer a challenge then, okay? So we've been doing these sessions for about 6 months, and you may have noticed that I've not dealt with technique once. Every single time we've dealt with a concept that I think's related to Aikido, and we've talked about it in depth, and we come up with some brilliant stuff. So how much of these sessions are you going to take away and bring to the mat when you go back? And how much are you taking from these sessions and using in your life?
So, gosh, I live Aikido. I don't know how else to say it. It's been part of my life for so long, and I came to it with a kind of set that allowed me to just like stream right in. I was ripe and primed, if you will, for training. And you know, I told this story the other night at this embodiment conference that I came to the mat because I had done a 10-day workshop with Richard Heckler's Lomi School, and we had an afternoon of Aikido, and I was like a duck in water until it was time for a Bokken strike. And I'm watching everybody, you know, getting off the line. My turn, sword comes up, sword comes down. I didn't duck, I didn't move. I was just like frozen. And my mind says, oh my God, what is that? So as soon as this 10-day was over, I went and signed up at the dojo to train. And I had 16 days of training on a Tuesday and Thursday. So there's a total of 16 days with Frank Duran, Shihan now. And then life showed up as a single mom and everything, and I needed to attend to my children. I stopped training. I was speaking to my mother one evening in a really rough conversation, and I found myself calm, not interrupting, letting her complete all the blah, blah, blah that was coming out of her mouth. And I looked down and I saw that I was standing in Hanmi. Mm-hmm. And I went, oh my gosh. I mean, in those 16 hours of training, something came through that was so profound that I went back to the dojo and I never left. It was like, you know, Both of my children trained in Aikido. They at some point stopped the physical practice, but they're in their 40s and they use this, what they learned as 7, 8, 9-year-olds, they use it in their life daily. You know, so we don't get to keep everybody, but I think everybody gets an imprint that sticks.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's good to hear. Patrick, you got your hand up.
Yeah, this will be hard for me to talk about. So this is about, I'm dealing with my father's death. He's in hospice. He's got maybe 4 days left, I think. So, but here's how I'd like to relate. So those of you who don't know me, I'm Patrick. I'm Paul Linden's student. I've been with Paul for 18 years. And Quentin's influenced me. He's been to our dojo a couple of times, but it's had some major influence on me as well. And there's some other people like Mary Heine has influenced me. There's another guy, Corky Quakenbush in Florida. He's influenced me. So what I've done or try to do is take what I learned from Paul as the core and then add Mary stuff, Quentin stuff, Corky stuff into it and put it more as the heart piece, the centerpiece of what I do. So to relate it to my Aiki moment I had with my father, so I call an Aiki moment for me, an Aiki moment is when in the relationship you have a spontaneous change, okay? And usually that spontaneous change is something for the better. Okay, to me, that's what I define as an Aiki moment. So between my father and I, we take shifts in taking care of him because of the COVID. We don't allow, we have hospice comes in, but we try to keep it controlled and so on, etc. So it was my shift, and my father was really combative with me. He was cussing at me, which when he had like really bad dementia, and it's quite common, they say, when you get into these states and so on. So as a vibration in me, I was tightening and wanted to strike because that's an attack. You could, you know, a verbal attack, you could see it that way. So I'm sitting there and I'm saying, okay, I know in my body I'm contracting, I'm doing shallow upper breathing, I want to hit back, all these fight-flight responses that are being triggered in me through his reaction. So what I did is I took a couple deep breaths, centered myself on my heart, and then said, okay, I'm going to do in my heart love and open towards my father and myself in this interaction. And about 2 minutes later, the spontaneous change came. I felt tremendous compassion for him and realized he needs to be held like a child and to be thought and loved like a child. But I felt that in my body as well as in my mind as a unit. You know, in Paul's way of thinking, the body and mind are a unit. They're not really separate from him. So I've learned to kind of see it that way, although I can a little different, but pretty close to it. So I really felt warmth in my body coming, especially in the chest region where my heart is, and then it spread all over. And then I was much able, my breathing got more deeper, I relaxed, I smiled, and then I was able to approach much easily. For me, that was an Aiki moment, that spontaneous change that was in the centered heart that happened through just in shifting my attitude and what I was doing in myself towards my father. So that's all I wanted to say.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Lovely.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Absolutely brilliant.
Jamie, you got your hand up.
No.
No? Okay.
Oh,
Right, well, I'm going to ask Joanna then. So Joanna, you keep showing up week in, week out, and you say lovely things about the sessions after the event. I'd love to know how they're influencing you.
So, hi everyone. Yeah, it's changing a lot. It's mostly weekends. I have another online class with one of my senseis. He's teaching a university. So people around Brazil have never heard about Aikido and stuff. And it's kind of every time I get out from here, get into the other room, and then I said, oh my God, this is this kind different worlds apart, because we really don't know these other people. How do we communicate our language, our Japanese words, our techniques, our breathing, our practice to another world of people that we have never met, different social classes, different places, different stories that we don't even know about them. And sometimes my sensei invites me to share something. Most of the times I got really inspired from the sessions here. Mostly I think the previous one about trust and confidence. So how do you build a relationship and an environment like this? And then I was talking to my sensei after the class, and then I said, please build this environment and this relationship with people, because this way you are gonna keep them close to you, or even more, you are gonna empower them to spread the word around. So they might leave the class and talk to their families or talk to somebody, oh, you know, I learned how to breathe that way. I heard a story about that thing. I heard another thing. So how can we nourish ourselves and then nourish our surroundings, the people that we relate to? So I don't know, several stories. I've also shared with Quentin's my grieving period this last time, and it's completely alive. It's an alive moment that also Aikido is alive. And how do we use these alive and living moments with us in every different waves of experiences that we have in our lives? So it has completely changed me. And I also told him that this environment that he builds that makes us stay. So I'm here. I told him that I barely don't remember why I came, and I'm still here. So hopefully keep saying that. That's a little part of it. So thank you very much, Quentin. It's really inspiring. It's actually Aikido 24/7. It's much more than the practice.
We're going to market that name, Hugh.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, your team did that with your white beard in Japan, if you remember, underneath the ginkgo tree.
Linda, what about you? Because every week you write your notes. I see you doing that.
I'm up to 2 notebooks now. Although I confess that part of this morning's exercise was drawing a palm tree instead of taking notes, but but I was listening. My practice, both because our dojo is closed, and because I've injured my foot, and then that injured my knee, and you know, that stuff has been almost entirely off the mat since the end of last year. I had surgery on in December. So even before quarantine, I was shut down. So I'm just shut down for longer. And so my practice has been all off the mat exercise, you know, a few Boken strikes here and there. But our dojo has been doing Zoom classes. And Sensei's taken on now a 7-week meditation course that we're doing. So that's always part of my routine. This discussion I'm so grateful for. It keeps me in touch with so many people that I used to only see once a year, which is wonderful, and a bunch of lovely new people. You know, so there's a great sense of community that comes from it, which is hugely valuable. Never mind physical practice. You know, just knowing that there are a bunch of like-minded people out there in the world, like you said, lighting candles each in our own way is a big deal. I've taken the inspiration from this, and I lead on Thursday nights. Thursday nights my time. I'm in San Diego. I lead a discussion, which is usually 2 to 4 other people. It's a very modest little thing, but you know, it makes a difference. It helps glue our dojo together sometimes, and often in this kind of experience where we're physically separated, you know, there are people who really need to reach out and connect, and it's nice to be able to provide a venue for that. So I'm literally following your example, you know, not of the Aikido, but of the
Sure.
way of bringing a community together.
Yeah.
And then, you know, of course, I try to. I often have ideas, usually maybe one or two in each from each class that really hit me as, you know, something like aha, like the lighting a candle struck me today. And there was something else, oh, from Linda Holiday Sensei's discussion, something that keeps bouncing around in my head is the idea that we should treat every person who steps onto the mat as a potential teacher. You know, it's sometimes easy to sort of dismiss, oh, you know, they're probably just screwing around, you know, they want to come here for fitness and to chat. But if you treat everyone as a potential teacher, which I really appreciate that sentiment, you know, and that's kind of what's happening here. I find this a very egalitarian experience. You know, you don't have like the few people who matter and the rest of us who are playing along, you know. So it's very inclusive. So I appreciate that. Anyway, it affects me in all sorts of different ways, and I take it out into the world in a lot of small ways too.
Oh, that's nice. So
Thank
I
you.
can tell you now that one of the topics I'm going to bring up in a whenever is going to be on leadership and hierarchy in Aikido. What role should they play? I think that could be fun. So we'll see what we make of that when we get to it. Sean, this is just the second time you've been here. Kind of, what sort of feedback can you offer?
I'm really heartwarmed by how wonderful a community you've sort of gathered around here with everybody, and this spirit of discussing things that don't usually come up in the dojo with, you know, physical, you know, sort of waza focused keiko, I think is so important. And so just at the most basic level, it's really wonderful to see other people who are really engaged in this. I come at things from a very what did O-sensei say, like kind of perspective. You know, and one of the things that he said was, you know, Aikido is 50% bu and 50% bun, right? And we all have a pretty good idea of how we practice bu and study bu. But
you want to just give us the translation for those who may not know?
Oh, yeah. So John Stevens translates bun as like deep learning, which is a pretty good translation in this case. You know, O-sensei studied calligraphy and he kept up with the scientific literature of the day, and he was constantly reading, you know, the Reikai Monogatari by, you know, Deguchi Onisaburo, Kyocho, and he was constantly reading the Kojiki. And the idea of bun is that it's part of his sort of larger project to, as he says in Aiki Shinzui, to sort of see the true form of the universe and to bring it inside yourself. So this sense of deep learning of bun is these sort of cultural practices, studies through the arts and literature and poetry, through discussion like this, right? Of really trying to better understand the true form of the universe and yourself and how things work, and sort of deeply root that into your person. He also has a lot of quotes about, you know, whatever truth you find in things, you know, find the truth in everything, and like bring it deeply inside of yourself, right? So just let go of the things that aren't true, but you know, find the truths and bring them inside of yourself. And this is all kind of part of this larger project of bun. And so that's kind of the lens in which I see what you know is going on here, and it's really inspiring to find such a vibrant community. Yeah.
David, you're always a thinker, and I would say that your traditional school of teaching was fairly physical, and here you are showing up in these sessions. I'm kind of intrigued.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, my school is definitely very physical. Although my teacher and his teacher, Master Noke, was certainly very spiritual. But his idea of Aikido was, you know, the amount of sweat that you come off was his definition of Aikido to a certain extent. In terms of, yeah, what's going to happen when I go back on the mat, whenever that will be, I will be different, but the difficult thing will be deciding, not that it really matters, where the influences are coming from. You know, as you know, I've been doing Feldenkrais training, so that's influencing how I move, how I think, how I breathe. I've also been on the embodiment conference this week, as well as other people. So again, you're thinking about grounding and centering and breathing from different systems and different ideas. It was fascinating watching the Systema demonstration yesterday. So there's a number of influences will, I would hope, will change my Aikido when I get back on the mat, which is good. So I'm actually looking forward to. In some ways, you could think I haven't been on the mat since February now. So in that period, traditionally my most of your skills would disappear or would be less for not practicing properly. But there's been practicing happening through these conversations, through imagining what's going on, plus some other stuff on Zoom as well. So. But I think just giving me some ideas to think about in terms of the role of Uki and Tori. I love listening to your ideas and spirituality. I've loved listening to the things that Mary Heine Sensei said and Linda Holler Sensei last week around gratitude and taking people as they are on the mat, and it's applicable in many areas of the work we're looking at. So. It's yeah, I keep coming back because I'm getting something out of it. It makes me feel better, and it's making me think a little bit about what I do, how I will maybe teach differently, and possibly, yeah, I might introduce a little bit more discussion in the dojo around the less physical aspects of it. But
interestingly enough, I had one of my first students got to first dan and then typically disappeared off the scene. But he came back a few years later, and actually he was better because he told me, what you taught me was really important, and I've really taken that on board, and I do try to live it. And I think he did. So I mean, he continued his practice in the way he chose to live his life, and he came back a much softer and gentler version of where he had been, when he left, which was rather encouraging. So you might just find that when you go back, rather than finding your skills have dimmed, that they've improved.
Yeah, I'm expecting so. So yeah, so this point of view, it's good. But just some of these things around, so we've discussed a lot of things around how we present Aikido and some of these ideas around recruitment or opening it up to children or to being more inclusive, more diverse, more accessible. All of these things are percolating in the background that I think will hopefully come out at some point in time, and yeah, I mean the world needs Aikido. It needs lots of other things as well, and if Aikido is a way of healing the world, then that will be great. But it's one of many different ways of attacking this problem that we've got as a society, as a global society and a global civilization. If what we do on the mat and take off the mat can do something, be a good thing.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been a more important time to get the message out there. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Anyone else got anything they want to offer or ask?
Quentin, I would just say a couple of folks have mentioned the embodiment conference. I mean, it really is a most extraordinary undertaking. If anybody there hasn't come across this, do look it up. It's going on for a few days more, I think, and involving hundreds of speakers and sessions, and it is remarkable.
It is.
And I mean, almost sort of summing up, I watched a session with Miles Kessler, who many of you will know, and was inspired to write one of my little haiku, which I tend to do quite often. And it goes like this. It says, tell me what is left when you shed things you don't need. Universal self.
There you go. That sounds like a good way to finish.
Could I just wrote in the chat, I think Molly spoke at the conference, Miles, we had quite a few great Aikido people, Mallory Graham, Sam Tatel, some really cool people. And thank gosh I can speak again. I was supposed to be doing a bunch of stuff with the conference, but that got a little bit interfered with, but I'm just able. So Saturday, we put both my sessions on Saturday. One is noon Pacific time, and it's going to be about, bringing somatics, and I'll be talking about Aikido as well, obviously, to mainstream society. How do we, which is like Aiki extending in a sense, but I'll be giving a lot of examples and looking at different aspects, whether it's in business or sports or education or peacemaking, all kinds of ones. But how do we translate this? How do we really be translators so that this isn't just for kind of the holistic community or people kind of already into embodiment or somatics or peace and that sort of thing? So how can we make this so that, we can really get this more into the mainstream? I sort of see myself as a guerrilla worker for, decades. Drop behind enemy lines. Wrong word, but you know what I mean. And the other one's going to be, it's in the evening, it's 9 p.m. Pacific time, but it's going to be about using Aikido principles, practices, energy awareness for body workers, therapists, and healers. And I've done a lot of trainings through the years for, in massage schools and body workers, and also consciousness in the body, some graduate courses in psych schools. And so I'll be kind of putting all that together, and it'll be very Aikido oriented. I have a friend, Elise Bauer, who's a Sandan, I think. She's going to be here. So I'm going to kind of have a client and an uke in a sense to work with, which will be really nice. But if anybody can make it to those. And also, so the Embodiment Conference really is an unbelievably rich library now of altogether over 11 days. I think it'll be about 1,000 presentations and all kinds of different channels. The sessions are free. Sign up. It's free for 48 hours. You have access, and for a price and a lower price through next Tuesday, you can get access. So, it's really a tremendous resource. And Mark Walsh, by the way, who founded it, he's probably 40 now, known him for 20 years. He was an original Aiki extensions person in his Aikido, worked with Don Levine, was one of our first Aiki Corps volunteers in Ethiopia. And he's, been spending a lot of time in yoga and all kinds of other stuff. But, he's got just such a strong Aikido feeling and Aiki extensions background that it's really nice. And you guys, I'm sure you know him. He's always been at Aiki Extending, and he's right there in Brighton in England. So, it's a great thing to support and to tap into. Really, really tremendous.
Pulled off an incredible feat.
Mm-hmm.
Just putting it together.
Yeah.
And kind of just to let you know, so next week, Chris Thorson will be back. We'll be looking at Aikido in business in particular. That'll be the subject. So there's an example of how do you take it out and put these ideas into the world. And I think it's a really important area, because I think so capitalist society has got a lot of, is at the back of a lot of problems in our world. And if we could be a little bit more moral in the way we transact business, the world would probably be a nicer place. So yeah, it'd be interesting to explore that one with somebody who's got a great deal of experience in coaching the ideas into business. But he will be talking Californian, so we'll have to keep him on the mark and get him to translate for us all.
That's what my noon session on Saturday is about.
There you go. Your Californian speak is a little more understandable, Jamie.
Well, and when it veers off, because I live in California, I can say, okay, I know I live in California, so blah blah, and then I can go on. So that's always nice.
All right, so thanks once again, everybody, for showing up. Thanks for your contributions all. It does make it a richer experience. And thank you, Hugh, for honouring me by grilling me as requested.
Pleasure.
Okay, see you all. Have a good
Wonderful.
Bye.
Well, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Hey,
you.
glad to see you
Bye.
talking, girl.